Hey there, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andrew Clark, and I have bought and sold a lot of pedals over the years. And in doing so, I've been able to build my perfect pedal board. But something that I haven't talked about on this channel are the pedals that didn't quite make it onto the pedal board, but that I would never sell or get rid of. So in this video, I'm gonna be digging into my pedal drawer and showing you 5 pedals that I just can't part with. But before we get into the first one, there are a lot of you that watch my videos that aren't subscribed. So if you're enjoying what I'm doing here on this channel, please consider going down below the video and hitting that subscribe button. With that out of the way, let's get into the first pedal. Okay, so this is an Analogman modded TS808, and it's very similar to your standard tube screamer. The only real difference here is that the switch has been replaced, so it's got this true bypass clicky switch, and then also a bunch of the internal components have been changed as well. So one of the pros and cons of a tube screamer pedal is it is very much like an effect because it has such a drastic EQ. So it creates this really aggressive mid hump, and it also cuts a lot of the low end and some of the high end as well. And for some setups, this is perfect, right? If you're running a Strat into a very scooped out Fender amp and you kick on a tube screamer, that mid-range is going to fill things in, make you cut through in a solo. It's perfect. But nowadays, in a lot of scenarios, we're kind of more into the more transparent overdrives. So for someone like me who really likes a blues breaker circuit, when I kick on a tube screamer, it's too much. It sounds more like an effect than an overdrive. And what this modded tube screamer does is it basically just tames all of that. So it's still going to have that big mid bump. It's still going to have a bit of a bass cutoff. It's still going to be a little bit on the dark side, but not as much as a typical tube screamer circuit. So let me plug it in and I'll show you what it sounds like. So here's the guitar clean. And here's the pedal. So one big trick with tube screamers is to actually bring the overdrive down. They work a lot better as like a boost into an amp that's starting to break up than they do as like a standalone overdrive. So if you bring the drive down to about here, and I bring the level up to compensate, and I'm just gonna leave the tone where it is for now. It sounds like this. Actually, let me give you clean again. So I really find that this is kind of where the sweet spot of this overdrive is. You kind of do your level to taste, but make sure it's pushing your amp, and really don't go too crazy with the overdrive. You can hear, if I bring the overdrive up, I don't like the sound of the overdrive from tube screamers. To me, it doesn't feel great. It feels very compressed and not in a good way. So it's much better when you keep that overdrive down and almost off even, but just so you're getting the benefits of that EQ and then using the level and the tone kind of to taste. To give you an idea of what the tone kind of can do is if I set it how I like it, which is here. Bring the tone down. And up. So you can hear we've got a decent amount of range. I honestly think that tube screamers shine as like a lead boost and being a lead soloing pedal. So your best bet is to set it up like this and then run it after your other drive effects. The reason I'm not getting rid of it is because it's a tube screamer that I actually like. When I'm looking for something to change it up from the Archer or from the King of Tone, and I want something that sounds a little bit different, this pretty much always fits the bill. And I think because I'm used to those more transparent overdrives, something like this is just a lot more palatable and usable for a guitar player like me. So next up, we've got a pedal that I'm sure you're very familiar with. It's the Strymon Flint. And what makes this pedal so great is that it's just so good at everything that it does. You've got the reverb side, which even if it just did the reverb, this pedal would be something you would want to get. But then on top of that, it's also got the trem, and it really just feels like an extension of your amp, right? Those old Fender amps had the vibrato, which was tremolo, and reverb built in, but this is going to give you 3 great reverb sounds and 3 trem sounds that honestly just sound so good. I'm sure you've heard it 100 times before, but I'll plug it in just to show you. So before we even get into the sounds of the pedal, some of the cool things: it runs in stereo, you can attach an expression pedal to it, you can also use a favorite switch so you can recall presets on it, and then it's also got a really good sounding buffer, so if you run this at the end of your pedal chain, it's going to push your signal along to the amp really nicely. So for the reverb side, you've got 3 controls. You've got mix, color, decay. We'll jump up to the 60s sound, so this is the spring. And we can jump up. Makes it brighter. And we'll just flick through the other ones quick. So the 70s sound. So it can really do like the vintage spring reverb thing, and it can also do some really cool ambient sounds as well. And then we jump over to the tremolo side. It's only got two knobs, intensity and speed. Intensity is the actual amount of the effect, and then speed is speed. So let's start with the harmonic. This is my favorite trem sound. Right now I use the Universal Audio Astro to get my trem sounds, but actually I think I like the harmonic trem on here a little bit more. We'll just set it pretty simple. So that. So very chewy sounding. Then we can flick down to the tube, which this is probably the standard tremolo sound that you're used to. It's got the volume kind of coming in and out. And then last up, we've got the photo setting. And this is that very staccato style. It sounds like this. We bring the intensity up even more. And you can get it to really do the on-off thing too. So you can hear it does all three trems really well. So the reason I'm not getting rid of this is just because there's so much value in this pedal. Even though I'm not using it on my board right now, I feel like if I were to build another board, maybe a smaller board where I really wanted to get maximum value out of a minimal amount of pedals, then I feel like the Flint is probably gonna end up being my first choice. Okay, so next we've got the Wazacraft Boss DM2. And you might be saying to yourself, why is this pedal on this list? It's just a pretty standard delay pedal that everyone has access to. But the reason is because this pedal actually completely changed my mind about delays. Up until about 3 or 4 years ago, I refused to use delay. And that's not for lack of trying. I tried some Strymon delays and some other great delays. And every time that I turn one on, I just go, nope, not for me. I'm turning it off. I don't like it. I just feel better without it. But then someone lent me this thing. And like I said, it's not some special pedal, but it was just that I didn't know that I loved analog delay so much. So this pedal doesn't have anything really fancy about it. It's just well made. It doesn't have like any special chip from the 80s or anything like that. It's just some cheap chip in here, but it sounds really good. So I'm gonna plug it in and I'm gonna show you what it sounds like. Okay, so we'll start off on the C setting here. The S setting is based on the original DM2, so it's got a very short decay. You can't get those really long repeats, so not super useful for me. This is what it sounds like. So it's really got that warm, cozy, lo-fi kind of thing to it. So the best way to use a delay pedal like this is to actually bring the mix down. So I'm gonna bring this down. When it's sitting more in the background, because an analog delay is so warm, it really fills in the space and kind of creates ambience, and you're not so worried about like the rhythmic qualities of it. So now we can do this type of thing. It just kind of hides behind what you're playing, but it definitely adds more depth. So I'll show you the difference between the C and the S settings here. I don't know if, I think it's like S is standard, which is like the old one, and then C is custom or something like that. I'm probably wrong. But they have totally different repeat rates and different kind of tones as well. So if I go over to S and I put the repeat rate as slow as possible, let's bring the mix back up. And then I'll switch over to the custom and I'll try and match it up. So right away you can hear the repeats go on for a lot longer and the tone is quite different. Go back to S here. So they both fade differently, but they're both good sounding delays. For me, the C setting is just more useful and I kind of like the sound of it a little bit more. So let's try a quick slap back setting here. Bring this down. So this pedal does have a rate input, which allows you to attach an expression pedal, but unfortunately you can't use a tap tempo with it. So for me, even though I really like the sound of it, it kind of makes it unrealistic for me to throw on a pedal board. Okay, so next up is a pretty cool one. This is a Chicago Iron Octavian, and it's an almost entirely faithful replica of the original Tycho Brahe Octavia. The problem with those old octave fuzzes is that they didn't really know how to match components properly back then. So what you ended up with was a whole bunch of pedals that sounded totally different from one another. So this one's got all the proper matched vintage components, but then it's also got an LED, it's got a power jack, and it's even true bypass. So I'm gonna go ahead and plug it in for you. And this pedal only has two knobs. So we've got volume, which basically controls the level, and then we've got boost, which controls the amount of fuzz. Now this fuzz knob is totally separate from the amount of actual octave. So the octave is gonna be engaged no matter what. The fuzz is just in addition to the octave. So here's what it sounds like. So you can hear it's not very gainy on its own. If I just go straight for these notes, you can hear the octave really starting to poke through there. But let's bring the boost up. So you can hear that the fuzz is pretty shrill. I like the sound of it personally, but what a lot of people will do is they'll actually bring that back down and they won't use the fuzz from this pedal for the gain. What they'll do is they'll run just the clean octave into another fuzz or into an overdrive. And what that does is it kind of warms it up a little bit. It doesn't make it quite so in your face, but I personally do like the fuzz from here. I'd like to know what you think too, so let me know in the comments below if you think the fuzz from this sounds good or if you would stack it up with a different pedal. One of the best tricks for getting the octave to really come through though is with your tone knob. So if you take your tone knob, especially on your neck pickup, roll it back and you play up in these higher frets here, it'll sound like this. So you can hear that octave really starts jumping out. And I think a lot of the charm of an actual analog octave fuzz is the fact that the octave isn't there all the time, right? It's totally different from like a POG where you're gonna hear that octave no matter what. It's cool that it kind of fades in and fades out depending on where you're playing on the fretboard. Honestly, if I had space for one more pedal on my board, this would definitely be on there. All right, so the last pedal on this list is something incredibly special to me. So this is an Analogman Sunface. Yes, I love Analogman very much. Let's make sure the camera focuses there. But this one has an NKT 275 red dot germanium transistor. Now that probably just sounds like a whole bunch of numbers and letters, but that transistor is so desirable right now. And the reason for that is because they were made in Britain in the 60s and they are not made anymore. And these are the transistors that were used in like the really good sounding old original germanium fuzz faces. Now this isn't to be confused with the NKT red dot or the NKT 275 white dot, which both sound great. This is the NKT 275 red dot. When I bought it back in 2013, I paid like $300 for it. But now if you look on Reverb, they're going anywhere from $1,500 to $3 grand. So these things have become a bit of a collector's item. And for me now, it's just one of those things that's kind of become an investment. So it's not like the transistor sounds so much better than anything else that's out there, but it definitely does sound really good. So I'll go ahead and plug it in and show you what a $2,500 fuzz sounds like. So it's got an incredible amount of low end that's kind of hard to control with certain amps. And overall, it's a very dark sounding fuzz. But where the magic is and why these transistors are so sought after is because of the way that it cleans up with your volume knob. So check this out. So full volume, and I'll just inch it back. so crazy interactive with your volume knob. And basically what you can do is you plug into a pedal like this, you roll your volume to like 5 to get your rhythm tone. Great sounding rhythm tone. And then when you want to do a lead, you just go down onto your bridge pickup and you bring that volume up. So it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but it is pretty cool. It's definitely a cool studio pedal, and I think that's what it's going to be for me. A bit of an investment, but it's also something that I can take to the studio and get some cool sounds from as well. One of the most important parts of this pedal, obviously, that you can see is this knob in the middle. That's a bias knob. This thing is super finicky with heat. So if it's not just like normal room temperature, this sundial, they call it, allows you to kind of deal with some little drops and some little rises in temperature. But honestly, when it's too hot, it just doesn't work. When it's too cold, it just doesn't work. But this is kind of what they would sound like when you under bias it like that, and then when I over bias it, at some point, I'd like to make like a full video on this fuzz, maybe comparing it to a more modern germanium fuzz. So if you're interested in something like that, please make sure you let me know. Okay, so that's gonna be a wrap for this video. If you enjoyed it, please let me know by giving the video a thumbs up. And also please consider subscribing to the channel because I upload a new guitar video every single week. With all that said, I hope you have a wonderful day and I'll see you in the next one.